to do is I would like to cover my composition book with this pink fabric. So I'm going to lay my book down here, and I'm going to see if I have enough to cover the whole book, and I do. And I'm using extremely precise measurements, as you can tell. I'm just cutting it off bigger than my book is. Move that aside. We may use it later. We don't know. Alright, and what I'm going to do before I start is I am going to take that little selvage edge off. As you can see, I'm at my special work table. You know, the really spacious one. Gonna slide my ironing mat back out of my way, and I'm gonna grab my ruler, which isn't where it's supposed to be. Is anything ever where it is supposed to be, right? Alright, so trim off that selvage, say goodbye to that piece. I'm gonna set this back on top of my mat. I'm going to open my fabric up and give it a quick iron. And it's not exact, of course. Is anything I do ever exact? Let's give this a quick iron here, just to get the wrinkles out of the fabric. And this is my little wool ironing mat that I covered a couple of weeks ago. And then we're going to take our composition book, and I want to do, I call this a dry fit. And all I'm doing is just folding the fabric over so that it stays in my book. And then I'm going to open it up. Oh yeah, I've got plenty of room. Hopefully you guys can see all of that over there on that edge. So I can even slide it over a hair so that I can do this. And then some of you are like me and remember doing like wedding albums back in the 80s, maybe the early 90s, where we literally would take hot glue and ruffles and lace and fabric and trim and dress up albums for things like for weddings or for babies, gifts. I cannot tell you how many of those things I gave as gifts back in those days. And we're kind of doing hot glue, but it's a whole different concept. I'm using Aleene's Tacky Glue, and I'm just drying it to the fabric here, or drying it to the book so that it will stay. I'm going to use a more permanent glue on the other side. Now I'm going to flip the paper back over here, and I'm going to set my ruler right there, just so if that glue isn't completely dry, then I don't have to worry about my paper sticking to my glue. And over on this other side, slide this over a little bit. Over on the other side, I'm going to be a little bit looser with the fabric. I'm going to give it just a little bit of give, because when the book is closed, I want it to not be strained. A little bit more glue. You could do this with school glue. You could do it with hot glue if you prefer. I'm just using the Aleene's because that's what I had sitting on the table. And I'm going to slide over Nothing wants to slide today. Why is that? I'm going to slide over my heat mat just so that it will protect a little bit. And then I'm gonna iron that glue down. Just keep your fabric straight. And iron your glue down. Happen to run your elbow across the paper and bend it up. Just do it back down. Now, I'm gonna close my book just real quick. I'm gonna take my little scissors and I'm gonna put a little snip right there at the center of the book. I'm going to snip the fabric all the way up to the book itself and do the same on this side, because I don't want that fabric bunching up there. And then we're going to open the book back up. And you can see I've got a little wrinkle right there. Not going to worry a whole lot with it. I'm going to take the edge and fold it down, and then I'm going to fold the fabric down right there. And once again, a little more glue. And my iron. Yes, I know I've got a little bit of fabric kind of poking up there. It's okay, I will take care of it. And then we're going to do the same down here. And you can curve this around there or anything. Let it dry for a second or two. Wipe my fingers off on the excess fabric that I pulled off. And then I'll take our iron right back to that. Just make everything lay down the way you want it to lay. And it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit messy. Not at this stage. And since this is water-soluble glue, even if it gets on my glue plate, it'll just wipe right off. Or my iron sole plate. Alright. The little plastic ruler again. Just so the paper doesn't stick to the glue. Flip the book around. See, I've got that little tiny bit of extra fabric right there. So it just lets everything stand up. I'm going to come over here. Little bit of glue. The bottle's still full, it just doesn't like it when I squeeze on it. And then just fold this all over. So you get all your fabric over on top of your glue. And I'm just doing this as a quick iron. Don't touch your fingers with the iron, folks. You're going to end up doing what I just did. And this is cardboard, so this glue is going to stick without a problem. And while that side's setting up, come over here. Now, there may be official quote-unquote ways to do this, but I'm not a paper crafter for the most part. I'm a sewer. So I'm just gluing. A little excess glue, just put it right there. And then glue. Just making sure that all my glue is dry. Set that aside for just a moment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Heat and Bond, and that is pretty much done there. And I'm going to lay my book right on top of my Heat and Bond. I'm gonna go out as close to the edge as I can. And I'm gonna put myself a little pattern. Now over here on this side, you can see that I've got a little chunk taken out. So I'm gonna come out here to the edge. And I'm gonna go right around there. Move my book out of the way. Now you could, if you want to be, if you want to use less Heat and Bond for this, you could. You could actually cut it out as a outline basically for your book. And cut most of that centerpiece out. So you could go right here in the center and cut most of this center out here and use that for another project, because you really only need the outer edge of this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it the way I've cut it. But Heat and Bond is not cheap. I know this. And you may want to be a little more frugal with yours. Now I've got to cut that completely off, so let's just go ahead and do that. And that one just jumped on the floor. And I did load these in from the edges, just so I wouldn't have to cut the edge out. And I'm using, just in case I didn't say it already, Heat and Bond Light. It has the purple logo on it. And I buy it, well, I've got a whole box of it, but if I'm buying it for specific projects, then I use the roll. Slide that out of the way. Alright, and now here's where you get to have loads of fun. I have all of these fabrics left over from doing my cave quilt, and I'm going to see if my little template will fit on that fabric. Now, if you're, you know, a little tiny bit shy, you could sew two pieces together, or you could move that so that it's at the back of it. But see there, that one fits. I like that. And then I can get one out of that, not two. If I could get two, I would do both inside covers with this. All right, so here's my other one. I know what's the front and what's the back because there's a little bit of a rounded edge on there. And I've got both my pieces of fabric and both my pieces of Heat and Bond stacked up. And now I'm just going to iron this top one, get it ironed down, and then I'm going to press. It only takes like 6 seconds to press this fabric down. But I'm doing 2 layers of it, so I'm going to give it a few seconds more than normal. And then I'm going to double check that they're both adhered. That one is, and that one could use a couple of seconds more. So let's do that. Okay, so we'll set that one aside to finish cooling. That one pretty much is done cooling. And now, big scissors. Sorry girls, it's the only way I figured to cut this one. And I'm just going to trim right around the edge of my Heat and Bond paper. You could have cut this out bigger if you wanted to, and then only have to cut exact one time. I probably should have done it that way. Then I would just be cutting on the line. So now we're going to bring our book back in. And see that here? Got a little piece of fabric sticking up. I'm not going to sweat it. I'm just going to cut it off. Alright. And now, through the magic of cooling things down and using Heat and Bond, I'm going to peel this paper off. And I'm hoping that the camera is picking up that shiny backside, because that is the adhesive from the Heat and Bond sticking. And then, remember, one edge is rounded and one edge is not. I'm going to take the Heat and Bond and make sure it's lined up with that rounded edge. And I had a little oopsie over there that wasn't perfect. But the Heat and Bond is going to hold it down for me. Get out of there. Alright, so here is the Heat and Bond piece. I'm more concerned about lining it up to this front edge right here and to the top and bottom than I am concerned about it being lined up back over here. And what I'm going to do now, I'm betting that most of you can guess. We're going to bring the iron in, and we are going to iron this piece of fabric down to the inside of the book. Now, Heat and Bond takes very well to this composition book cardboard. And this is a pure self-indulgence project. You probably all know that. Nobody is going to see these books but you. So if you get in here and you decide that you want to make patchwork or use that really strange fabric or unusual fabric that you bought, and you're like, I have no clue what to do with this, but I love it. Well, you can always put it on something like this. Alright, so now it's ironed down. And there's our little book. I still have a little bit hanging over the edge, but I'll take my little scissors and I'll trim that up. But it holds well. And then let me cut this one out and I'll show you that one more time. Alright. Move my little scrappies out of the way. Once again, this is adhered. And let me start the paper coming off. Sometimes with small pieces you have to use like a pen or something. With these big pieces it shouldn't be a problem. Unless, of course, you and Arthur are best friends like I am. There we go. Once again, you can see that the shiny is stuck to the fabric. So that's fine. That means that your adhesive is glued on. Lay that piece of paper out of my way. And again, bring your curved edges out to match the front edge of your book. And see, on this one I had a little bit of the opposite problem that I had on the other one. The other one I had a little bit of overlap, and on this one it's just not quite. But you lay it down. And before you ever get an iron near this, you definitely want to make sure that everything is where you want it. See, there's a little piece of fabric volunteering there too. Alright, and then let's take our iron. And I'm starting at the front edge because that's the part that I want to make sure is lined up best. And then you just hold your iron on there for a few seconds so that Heat and Bond can bond. And see, this is why I wasn't super worried about that glue around the edge. And my front and back covers don't match, and I don't care. I like it. I'm not a huge fan of Kaffe Fassett fabric, but I found, like I said before, several of these in here that I really like. Now, if you wanted to do the fancy dancy like the 80s and 90s, you could have glued some lace around this edge before you put this inside piece on. You could have done just about anything. And the one cool thing about this composition book, that cardboard is thin enough that you can actually, if you want to, sew a stitch around that edge, or you could sew an embroidery into the center here, I'm going to do just a real quick little, I've got a couple of pieces that are left from my elephant that I cut out that still have heat and bond on the back of them. And just for illustration purposes more than anything else, making sure that's all got heat and bond on the back. Now obviously these books are never ever ever going to get washed, but if you wanted to, you could go on your sewing machine and go around these and stitch them into place just for something cute. And then let me show you the previous one that I showed before, because this is one that I did with all the same fabric, front and back. And then I added a couple of little, those applique pieces. And I actually made a bookmark for this one so that I can just literally lay it on the page and find the page I was working on last using that bookmark. So there's a couple of little notebooks. You could use these for anything. I'm using mine to, as I said in the other video, keep my brain from exploding, because I get so many ideas in my head, and if I don't write them down somewhere, then I end up not remembering them, or I end up worrying about not remembering them. So if I have someplace that I can write it down, it works really well. I appreciate you guys watching. If you like this video, please give me a like, and if you'd like to see more ideas for what comes out of my head, then I'd love it if you'd subscribe to me and follow me on social media. I do have a Facebook page, Practically Creative with Melissa. But thank you for watching, and you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.